Mr. President.
Senator for West Virginia.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today to support Senator Sullivan's resolution of disapproval to nullify the Biden administration's rollback of reforms to the National Environmental Policy Act, or NEPA, process. We're hearing a lot about permitting and how everything's going to be improved. If you want to make a statement on how you want to improve permitting, this should be a yes vote for everybody. I want to thank my colleague from Alaska for his leadership in bringing together half of this chamber in support of SJ Res 55, which is co-sponsored by 50 senators. This resolution is vital to us to take us towards a path of quicker, more predictable environmental reviews as we seek to improve our transportation. Remember, we just passed a big infrastructure bill, had a lot of transportation, our water and infrastructure, energy infrastructure, reclaim our energy independence, and build our domestic supply chains. Instead of making the environmental review process more efficient, the Biden administration has been doing everything in its power to make it much, much more difficult. Environmental reviews are notorious for holding up energy and infrastructure projects. And what happens? Well, some of them don't get done. A lot of them get a heck of a lot more expensive, and it takes longer to do. We all know it's important to make sure that we assess the environmental impacts that a project will have before moving forward on construction. But the Biden administration is focused on making them more complicated and longer when the status quo is already unacceptable. In 2020, the White House Council on Environmental Quality found that it took an average of 4.5 years to complete an environmental impact statement under NEPA. 1/4 of the 1,276 projects analyzed took more than 6 years to complete an environmental impact statement. The average time for a federal highway project was more than 7 years on their EIS. The average time for a U.S. Corps of Engineers was 6 years. The average length for a final EIS length of the bill, 661 pages. And many of these swell to over thousands of pages, running contrary to the original intent of NEPA, which was to provide transparency of federal agencies' decision-making to the American people. The previous administration tried to streamline the federal environmental process by reforming the implementing regulations for NEPA. Now, rather than continuing to improve environmental reviews under NEPA, the Biden administration has decided to make them more burdensome. Earlier this year, the Biden administration rolled back key modernizations the previous administration made to the more than 40-year-old NEPA rule through its so-called Phase 1, which tells me Phase 2 is coming, NEPA rule. The Biden administration has created sweeping new obstacles to the environmental review process, including new avenues for delays and lawsuits that will slow down, or as I said, kill projects. In particular, the Phase 1 rule expanded definition of effects includes indirect and cumulative effects of projects will greatly delay and kill energy process when we sorely need them right now. With the damaging Phase 1 rule already in place, the Biden administration is now working on even more onerous revisions to the NEPA process. If these revisions are not stopped, they will enshrine lengthier, more burdensome, and even, in some cases, insurmountable hurdles for any infrastructure, whether it's mining, industrial, or energy. We keep hearing we need more energy. Well, if you can't get permitted, you can't do these projects. And that's what's happening. The Biden administration is hamstringing our nation's ability to source materials and build infrastructure of all kinds for all Americans. Whether it's roads and bridges, pipelines, electric transmission, mining, or renewable energy projects, an efficient environmental review process is critical to completing projects that support job creation and economic activity. It is also vital to building out and securing our domestic supply chains to ensure we have the fuels and mineral inputs to power critical services and to manufacture those products. We're not going to have all the solar farms and wind turbines and critical minerals and green jobs that the administration has promised to energy workers when the environmental process takes 5 to 7 to 10 years. So how do you build an economy out of a recession when you can't build at all? Now it's time to come together, reform the environmental review process, to expand our infrastructure, invigorate our economy, increase our energy capacity and supplies, advance our domestic industries to lower prices, create those much-wanted jobs, and build a brighter future for Americans, and certainly in my state of West Virginia. It starts with doing away the roadblocks the administration is throwing up by passing this resolution and moving on to legislate common sense environmental review reforms. We are told that in September, Senate Democrats will cast aside their regulate first philosophy and pass strong permitting reform legislation. After years of regulatory actions that decimated energy production in my state and permitting delays that have held up important infrastructures across the country, I'm skeptical that the Democrats will reverse course next month. So here we have an opportunity to have a test vote. As this NEPA rulemaking reflects, the administration is hard at work creating more hurdles for our projects. If there isn't overwhelming bipartisan support for this resolution of disapproval, that simply stops the permitting process from getting worse, then I don't know how anybody can believe that Senate Democrats will join to pass meaningful legislation to make the process better. I urge my colleagues to vote for this resolution to free our country from the stagnation and endless delays